All right, turn around.
This is Paul W. Opsahl, President of the South Dakota Farmers Union. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear an address given by Honorable M.Q. Sharpe, former governor of South Dakota, analyzing attacks made by private power companies opposing the Power District law. This broadcast is transcribed at the 3rd District Convention of the South Dakota Farmers Union, held at Pier on last Saturday, February 12th, where hundreds of farmers from all over the state were gathered to hear this important issue discussed. This broadcast is sponsored by the South Dakota Farmers Union and REAs of the state. Mr. Sharpe.
President Opsahl, Chairman Larson, and ladies and gentlemen of the 3rd South Dakota Farmers Union District and visiting guests and friends. The purpose of this address is to give you information about the Consumer Power Districts Bill now before the Legislature of South Dakota. To you, the people, it is one of the most important questions that has ever been before that legislature. It is the question of whether or not all of the people of South Dakota are going to share equally in the 6 billion kilowatt hours annually of electric energy which will be released here in South Dakota by the Missouri River development. Also, it is the question of whether the useful, convenient, profit-making, pleasure-giving light, heat, and power from electric energy will go to all the people of South Dakota at rates so low they will become more abundant in everyday life and shed their benefits of time-saving, labor-saving, drudgery-saving, and money-saving, and profit-making into all of the homes, shops, offices, farms, ranches, schools, churches, and other institutions generally and equally, now and forever after. The battle for the control of all that electric energy and the battle on the question of whether or not it shall pass from the turbine generators of Fort Randall, Oahe, Big Bend, and Gavin's Point into the meters of you, the consumer, at the lowest possible rate, without any intervening dividend to anyone, accepting the immense benefits and profits which will come to you, the consumer, from the use of it, is right now being fought before your very eyes. Your legislature will decide the outcome of that battle. I appreciate very much the generosity of the Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of South Dakota in giving me the opportunity to speak to so many of you upon this important subject. In recent years, this great militant organization has commenced to stress more and more the educational phase indicated by its name. And this information, which I have the opportunity to give you, is a part of the educational work of this great organization. In view of the way society is now organizing into special interest groups and organizations for all kinds, it is essential that every farmer join some farm organization and help in the battle for that great original occupation of mankind. Education is all that is necessary to cause the people of South Dakota to insist upon having these natural resource benefits controlled by and applied solely to their own best interests and uses. The South Dakota State Rural Electric Associations, the 3 major farm organizations, are now in fact fighting this battle to save for all of the people of South Dakota, city and country alike, and without discrimination, one of the most valuable resources they have, the electric energy which will be developed from the running waters of the Missouri River and eventually from our lignite coal fields. If we win this battle, all of you, the people, city and country alike, and without discrimination, and your descendants in the years to come, are going to control, have, and enjoy these benefits. You, I hope, will therefore appreciate what the state REAs and the 3 farm organizations and affiliated supporters are doing for you in their unselfish work to fight this battle for all of you. Their task would have been much easier for them. They would not have met so much opposition had they confined their work only to getting consumers' power districts for rural areas and left the cities and towns and industries out of it. But they recognize the fact that all of us, the people, city and country alike, are mutually dependent on each other, and that these great natural resources belong to all of us on an equality basis, and that the successful way to wage this battle was the fair and unselfish way. So, equality of distribution to all South Dakotans at the lowest possible rate is in fact our battle plan and our battle cry. Possibly you would like to know, before I unfold the main arguments, that what is a consumer's power district? A consumer's power district is a voluntary, non-compulsory, non-dividend public corporation authorized to engage in the electric energy business. It has no means of forcing itself onto any area where it is not wanted. If 15% of the people of Sioux Falls or any other city or town or township should sign up a petition to do so, a consumer's power district could be organized there. If it was organized, however, it could do no business unless the inhabitants of the city or town voted a franchise, or unless it could buy out the existing private company. It could not force them to sell out. It could build lines in the rural areas, however, if the county or township board gave it right-of-ways. A consumer's power district has no authority to bind the property of any person in it with any bonds, taxes, or obligations of any kind. The only way it can get its money is to start by sale of revenue bonds. It cannot even mortgage its own plant, excepting to the United States government in certain special cases. It is not permitted by its charter to make dividends to anyone. Its profits, if they are made, go back into lower rates, better service, extended service, more abundant service. It cannot levy taxes on any person or his property, nor can any state, county, or city levy taxes for it. On the contrary, however, the consumer's power district pays taxes the same as a private electric company pay. The records over the United States, according to statistics of the Federal Power Commission, show that power districts actually pay 27% more taxes on the same basis than private companies pay. Because of its non-dividend restriction, it does not have to pay United States income tax, but that is because it does not have any net income. It does not have to pay the federal energy tax of 3 1/3% because it is a non-profit operation. All state and local taxes it pays the same as a private company. Because of its public corporation status, it can sell its revenue bonds on the open market at practically as low a rate of interest as the United States government sells its bonds. Most consumers' power districts finance themselves by selling their bonds on the open market. No one makes any profit out of a consumer's power district excepting the consumers themselves, whose profits accrue through lower rates and better service and the more abundant use of electric energy, which reduces their home expenses and increases their own profits if they are in any kind of a business, farming, ranching, grocery business, office, or industry of any kind, or whatever they do. A consumer's power district has to win its business by competition in the open market. It cannot furnish electric energy at lower rates and with better service just because of discrimination in benefit of one locality. If it cannot furnish them at lower rates and with better service than a private utility, it will never get started and it will never get business. If it cannot furnish it at lower rates and better service, it will never have a chance to operate. But if it can furnish them at lower rates and better service, then it ought to have the chance and to get started, and that is all the consumer's power district, which we are fighting for to get past, wants or does. Because of its non-dividend restrictions and its ability to borrow its money so cheaply, the record now of many years' operations in various parts of the United States and Canada show that invariably consumers' power districts, sometimes called public power districts, reduce the rates from 25 to 40% below anything that a private utility can furnish. During that same time, they pay more property taxes than private utilities pay to local, state, county, city, and school districts and similar government agencies. The private companies make some feeble attempts to dispute these claims, but the statistics are against them, and so consumers' districts continue to grow in size and in number all over the United States. What are some of the arguments against these consumers' power districts, and who makes them? Well, the main argument that you always hear is that power districts are communism, socialism, government ownership, and destruction of free enterprise. This argument is totally false. A power district is not government ownership, socialism, nor communism. It does not destroy free enterprise. On the contrary, consumers' power districts we are fighting for are the free enterprise and private enterprise in the truest sense of the term. The government does not own them nor control them any more than it does a private utility. It does not finance them nor give them one dime of money. It does not have to furnish them anything excepting the law under which they operate. They start from scratch, acquire their capital by issuing their own bonds, build or buy their facilities, and sell their energy to their patrons measured by the quantity each patron uses. They do not furnish energy freely, nor on any socialistic nor communistic basis. Neither the nation nor the state directs their activities nor forms their policies. Their management is retained at home under their own board of directors and officers, selected by the vote of the people on non-political ballots. The only difference between a properly authorized power district and a privately incorporated private company is that the power district plows its profits back into lower rates, more extended service, improved service, or a combination of one or all of them. It does not make dividends for its investment nor management. That is the only difference, but it is a controlling difference. It is the reason why they can reduce rates and also extend and improve service to such an extent that private utilities cannot meet the competition on a self-sustaining basis and are therefore driven to the only answer they have, namely the name-calling argument of government ownership, socialism, communism, or destruction of free enterprise, all of which is absolutely false, a fact which the public is rapidly finding out. Article 13, Section 12 of the Constitution of your own state of South Dakota says this: the manufacture, distribution, and sale of electric current for heating, lighting, and power purposes are hereby declared to be works of public necessity and importance in which the state may engage. That got in there as a part of our Constitution only because a majority of the people of South Dakota voted for it, and anyone that says a consumer's power district is communism or socialism is saying that a majority of the voters of South Dakota who put that in their Constitution were communists or socialists. And they are also saying that every single REA association in the state is also communistic and socialistic. They are all so saying that every municipal electric light plant in the state is a communism and a socialism enterprise. One of the vapid arguments appearing in the association circular and copied and editorialized in some of the newspapers of the state says, well, if it is good to take the profit out of electric energy, why not take it out of the grocery business, the hardware business, the farming business, the law offices, the barber shops? It is almost unbelievable that any alleged businessman would expect the people to be misled by that kind of a false analogy. The answer to that false analogy is this: if there was only one grocery store allowed in the town, only one hardware store, only one farm, or only one law office or one barber shop, we would say take the profit out and serve the public first. But the grocery store business, the hardware business, the farming, the law business, and the barber business all depend upon the personal element of competition and are open to all at any time. You simply get your capital, your experience, or your education and start. Not so with the electric energy business. You must get the authority of law which we want by this bill. You must then get the local franchise and support. There is no competition nor free enterprise to the electric energy service in South Dakota today. It is a monopoly in the hands of 3 or 4 large private power companies owned and controlled almost entirely outside of South Dakota. It is a closed shop proposition. Let us see, however, if this profit motive is such a controlling factor in good business affairs. If it does produce such results, then we ought to follow it out and apply it to everything. Why not put the roads and bridges back into private enterprise like they used to be? Maybe private enterprise could make a profit out of them from charges for your use of them, and with that profit could pay some taxes. Why not put the city and town water systems back into private enterprise like they used to be and let profit be made from your consumption of water? Why not put our great public school system back to private tutoring schools and colleges like it used to be, so that only a few people had education? Private enterprise could make a lot of profit if profit is the main thing that you are seeking. Why not put the parcel post system back to the express companies? Private enterprise could make a lot of profit out of that. The answer is that profit is not and never should be the primary consideration in all matters of public welfare. There are things which attain such a plane of position of public service operations that it is plain good judgment and common sense to operate them primarily in the public benefit as a public power district does. This tax argument is always the second thing claimed by the private utilities. I have heretofore shown you in this address that the private companies do not pay as much taxes on the same property to local districts as do the public power districts or the consumers' power districts. But the best answer to their objection to this is that when we met before the committee of their legislature Friday night, February 11th, 1949, we told them in just so many words that we think the consumer's power bill we have submitted to you makes us pay exactly the same taxes as a private utility would pay. But if you do not think so, it is perfectly agreeable to us for you to write that tax ticket to suit yourselves, because we expect that consumers' power districts shall and will pay exactly the same local, state, county, city, and school district taxes that the private utility pay. Another flimsy misrepresentation in the newspaper advertisements and the circulars of the private power companies is the statement that power districts cause power shortages in the state where they operate. Their claim is that in every state where you have power districts, you also have a power shortage. Most assuredly you do. The lower rates and better services which power districts have produced in all of those states where they operate have caused such an increase in demand that there is a temporary power shortage until they catch up with it. But what do the power districts do about it? Power districts have the power and authority to act as efficiently as private companies. Nebraska, the largest power district, is now building and will soon complete a $12 million steam generating plant near Omaha. More than all of the private companies in South Dakota have spent for some years, and more than they plan to spend for several years. In Nebraska, these same consumers' power districts are building 2 other large plants. Power districts are the very tool you need to meet a power shortage. Then they say, power districts will hurt instead of helping South Dakota, and they say that the reason for this is that it will obstruct them in financing their own investments so they can build more plants. The answer to that is that power districts can borrow money in the open market on their bonds today as cheaply almost as the federal government can borrow it. There is plenty of finance available for properly operated and managed utility companies, public or private. If power districts can borrow on their revenue bonds only, why can't private companies borrow it on their revenues and their plant mortgage both, which they have a right to give, while power districts do not? Power districts can build the new plants and lines required just as rapidly as private companies. They are now doing so in various places. Then they say, power districts are not needed in South Dakota. This is another paid advertisement going through all the newspapers and in some of these circulars of institutions trying to give some support to the private power company position. They say they are not needed because REAs will still have their priority rights to Missouri River power, and the power districts do not give them any more rights. Sure, REAs have rights, but the exercise and getting the benefit of those rights is a far different thing than just having rights, and we are after getting the benefits. And the REAs in South Dakota all put together cannot begin to claim South Dakota's share of the preferential Missouri River power. Furthermore, and this can always be said to the credit of the State REA Association and the three great farm organizations, that they are really fighting right now to save for all of you people, city and town alike, the right to South Dakota's share of this preferential power in the Missouri River. The only ones that have that preferential right are public bodies and cooperatives. That means about 20 or 30 municipal light plants in South Dakota and about 32 REA co-ops. Some 400 and more cities and towns of South Dakota would not have a shadow of claim on that preferential power through REAs alone, or through the Bureau of Reclamation, or through private utilities. But with the coming of consumers' power districts, who also can claim this preferential power for them, then every city and town in the state will share equally in this preferential power of the Missouri River, and they can finance their industries and attract industries to the various cities and towns, because they can say, we too have this preferential power through the agency of our public power district serving this territory. Then they say, as another argument against them, well, the Bureau of Reclamation and the private utility companies put together and the REAs all acting as a group can do just what these consumer power districts do anyway. That is one of the stock arguments of the private power companies. In the first place, they cannot do the same thing as I have just shown you. They cannot claim the priority for the great majority of city and town people where there are no municipal light plants. In the next place, if the private utilities are in the picture, right then and there they have a right to claim a profit for their services in transmission or distribution. Second, what kind of operations do you think you are going to get from a system whose operations and control are all divided up between three different groups? The Bureau of Reclamation with control at Washington under the Federal Power Commission, the private power companies with control lodged in New York and Chicago, and the 32 different REA cooperatives scattered all over South Dakota. They just couldn't give you a uniform system like a public power district can give you all over the state. Lastly, we want to get control of our own power through power districts organized at home and whose directors are elected by you, the people, right here and now. We do not want either the Bureau of Reclamation nor the Federal Power Commission nor the Public Utility Commission trying to fix our rates and bringing us into endless rate hearings, nor do we want them deciding when and where we shall build our plants nor extend our lines. We want one agency that can own and control and can do all of this work well, and the record proves that power districts can do it all well. Then they say private power companies can pass on the savings to the ultimate consumer anyway from this Missouri River. That is only partially true. They cannot pass it on to all of the 400-odd cities and towns that do not have municipal plants. But the real answer to that argument is, granted that the private utilities can pass on some savings from the Missouri River power, but the inevitable unyielding fact is that they cannot pass on as much savings as power districts, because private utilities simply have to make a profit for dividends on capital, and power districts do not. They are in fact restrained from doing so. I am going to give you just one brief set of statistics which is typical of many other sections of the United States. Here is the record of 10 power districts in the state of Washington. They are under the Columbia River Hydro and have the same situation as we under the Missouri will have when our development is complete. These districts started up in the years from 1940 to 1946. The average rate that all residential and farm consumers were paying to private utilities just before the power district started was 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Today, that average rate under consumers' power districts is only 1 1/2 cents per kilowatt hour. Furthermore, this great reduction in rate enabled those consumers really to have, to use, and to enjoy their electricity. Just before power districts got started, they were using only 1,300 kilowatts per annual use per residence and farm units. With the advent of much lower rates, they are now using an average of 3,000 kilowatts per residence and farm units, nearly 2 1/2 times as much. These statistics are records of the Federal Power Commission and of the state of Washington, and I am holding in my hand right now the list from which I have taken and am reading them to you. They are not any exception. They are typical of conditions over the United States and Canada. I can read you similar ones from the Pacific section, the Northeast section of the United States, and the central part of the United States, and practically from all over the United States. The private companies know that they cannot meet this competition. They simply want you to protect them at your own expense and at the expense of generations of South Dakotans yet to come in the monopoly which they have had long enough. Ladies and gentlemen, I have answered all of the main arguments which are being used against the Consumers' Power District Bill. There may be some minor ones which I have not had time to answer in this radio address. I feel sure that you will find the answers to them. If you think this Power Districts Bill would be a good thing for South Dakota and for you, the people, as I think it would be, it is time that you give us some help. Will you please, right now, wire, telephone, write, or express your views by personal contact to your legislatures, all of them appear, asking them to decide the issue of this battle in favor of all of you, the people, on an equality basis all over South Dakota, instead of deciding it in favor of private power companies who are the only ones really fighting against this Consumers' Power District Bill.
Well, ladies, and then we say to her, do you ever buy fish? Any time of the week, do you ever buy fish? It's 3 times as much as it was in 1946. And of course, there's no price support for fish. It isn't even authorized by the law. So, ladies and gentlemen, you go all the way across the things that people have to buy. And despite the general impression in this country that the high cost of living has been the caused by farmers' price supports, you cannot find one iota of evidence of that fact. Sure, we support the price of 2 commodities this past couple of years. We supported the price of eggs, and I hope some of you folks took advantage of it if it was necessary. But I certainly am not proud of the fact that all we paid you for your eggs last year was 35 to 37 cents a dozen. Who in this country says that the price of eggs at 35 or 37 cents a dozen to the American farmer is an unreasonable price? Let them go out and buy the chicken feed last year and then come back and tell us that. Well, of course, we have got one little vulnerable spot, the opposition says, and they start getting out the long story about potatoes. Well, you know, I got a lot of Irish in me, and at times I almost feel ashamed of the island because we named the Irish potato after it. The poor little old Irish potato is being maligned as I never saw an inanimate object maligned before in all its life. The poor potato is the horrible example of price supports in this country. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have supported the price of potatoes, and let's say why we got into it. We got into it because during the war, under a law passed by a very intelligent farm leader by the name of Stegall, we put a price support under potatoes at 90% of parity in order to induce farmers to produce them, just as we put a very high price support price under flax this year, because we want to become independent in this world of other countries for drying oil, flaxseed and linseed oil. But back to potatoes now. Sure, we have lost some money on potatoes because it's a perishable. You can't store it and you can't keep it too long. But I want to say to you that when in 1946 we began to see that the American production of potatoes was going to run close to 500 million bushels, and that we, as a matter of fact, in this country only use about 385 million bushels. And it's odd, ladies and gentlemen, that even though we are even though our population is increasing, we're still only using about 385 million bushels of potatoes. I personally suspect a lot of ladies in this audience because they somewhere got the idea that potatoes is making them fat, and so they've quit eating them. But whatever the cause is, we aren't increasing our consumption of potatoes, and we certainly have increased our production of potatoes with 4 things actually, and anyone in this audience can tell me. First, DDT killed a good bunch of those potato bugs that used to reduce our production. Second, we had 2,4-D and some of the other weed killers, which made our potato hills bigger and more potatoes per hill. Three, we had fertilizer. After the war was over, after we had quit using those chemicals for killing people, we came back and put it on the land, and it helped us produce potatoes in bigger quantities. And four, we had machinery and we could do the job easier. That's the reason in 1946 we increased the production of potatoes per acre, on the average in this country about 40 bushels to the acre. And it must be said that we went to Congress and pointed these difficulties out, and we said there's an abnormality here about the potato program, because the very high price plus the efficiency of production has gotten some people into it who didn't get into it during the war and who aren't entitled to it. And we'd like the authority to put those people on a different basis than the people who started to produce potatoes because we needed them so badly during the war. And we've never gotten the authority to do it. And the very people who deny us that authority in 1947 and in 1948, and we wrote them in 1946, the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the Senate, we wrote them both in 47 and 48 and told them about the program. Those are the very people who are complaining about the price supports and saying they're the cause of the high cost of living. And then let's scotch one other thing that the lady along that goes into the store in the big city has on her mind. She says this price support program is costing the American taxpayers millions of dollars. And I'll bet you I can show you that very statement in printed papers from all corners of this United States. I'll bet I could produce 50 of them in 15 minutes after I set foot in my office. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commodity Credit Corporation, which operates all of your price support programs and has operated all of them since 1935, has not only not lost a cent for the American taxpayer, it has, as of the end of the fiscal year, this past fiscal year, a net gain of $80 million for the American people. They say to you, well, how can you make money and support prices? Why, ladies and gentlemen, we bought cotton for a number of years under a price support program, and cotton is not a perishable. And we stored it, and along came a time when the world wanted cotton, and we sold it at the market, and we made almost $400 million on cotton alone. We've made lots of money on the other storable commodities. It's a long-range program, the type that the Department of Agriculture has been urging the Congress to adopt, which levels out the peaks, both in the cost of the things farmers produce and the cost of the things that farmers have to buy. And it is that kind of long-range thinking that makes these programs just spend $1,000 that you loan so-and-so to buy a tractor. Incidentally, $1,000 won't buy a tractor. $2,000 to buy that tractor. Why, all we do is loan the money, and we aren't even loaning the government's money in most cases. The bankers in your community will loan you the money on your crops, and we guarantee it to him. It's no loss, ladies and gentlemen, at all. As a matter of fact, it's very likely to be a profit before we get through with our grain operations. And I say to you that if we had adequate storage facilities over this country, that the assurances that the wheat operations of this government would be a profit would be very greatly increased. Because if we had adequate storage all over this country to put our wheat and our corn and our other grains in and keep it safely, we would be in a position to say, well, we'll just hold on to this until the market rights itself. Because those of you who study the Bible a little, and I hope we all do from time to time, remember that even the Lord's chosen people only had 7 continuous years of good weather. We have had 8. And we had a bad year in corn last year, didn't we? We've had a wonderful year in corn this year. But we can't be certain in this country that there isn't going to be times when our crops may fail us in one part of the country or in another. And therefore we do need storage. And we need an ever-normal granary in this country. And ladies and gentlemen, if I have anything to say about it for the next few years, I'm going to start the fight for the restoration of our storage capacities for farm commodities in this country. We've had this past year or two what we call the development of a long-range program. It isn't something new. Every one of you have contributed to it, either through your experience or through talking with your AAA committeemen, your old your PNMA committeemen, now your AAA committeemen, or talking with your soil conservation people. Or we've even gotten good suggestions out of the REA folks, the crop insurance folks, and all the rest of them. We've pitched in to develop a very good long-range program. And don't let anyone tell you you've got one today, because that bill, which was passed in the last few minutes of the special session, of the regular session, is not the long-range program that the Farmers Union has been talking about, or that your leadership has been talking about, or that the Department of Agriculture has been talking about. As a matter of fact, it only touches on one point, doesn't it? And that's on price support. And it was only by the skin of our teeth that in those last few minutes we even got an extension of the present price support mechanisms. I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that there are many other things besides price supports. But price supports are the foundation upon which our agricultural program is built. And I don't want to hear people tell me, and I hope you won't tolerate them telling you, that, I can be for price supports, but stop right there. And when they're asked the question, well, what do you mean by it? What kind of price supports? Are you for price supports at 20%? Are you parity? Do you want price supports at the stop-loss level? Or are you for the kind of price supports we have today, which are a genuine effort to try to guarantee the American farmer a parity of income with the rest of his population? That is the kind of a price support program we are trying to administer today. And those of you who say that it's high-level price supports and that it must be graduated down, I just ask them to tell you why they don't start on some other segment of this economy. Why, every time we're going to adjust the American economy downward, and I'm one who says it don't have to be adjusted downward, but why must we always start with the farmer? In 1920, we adjusted the American economy downward by reducing farm prices 50% in 1 year. And what happened? We set in motion the processes by which the entire economy come tumbling in upon top of the farmer. And so these folks who have methods and plans for reducing the price of farmers' goods without relationship to the price of the other things that farmers have to buy, or without relationship to the income of the rest of our community, are not talking about the kind of a program that I think the Farmers Union backs and the kind of program your department has been urging on the Congress this past 2 years. Because we have in that program this very thing called parity, don't we? Parity to you and I and to everybody else means an equitable relationship between the things farmers have to sell and what farmers have to buy. And when the things that farmers have to buy goes up, then the price of the things he has to sell should go up. When the price of things farmers has to sell comes down, then farmers are willing to see the price of the things he wants to see the price of the things he has to buy come down. There's a relationship between it. In short, the farmer doesn't want to go above and stay above the economy of the country, and he certainly don't want to stay below it. And any kind of formulas which try to graduate him down faster than the parity formula is, in my opinion, not in the best interest of all the farmers of this country, and is not the kind of a program you have now and for which we have been fighting and working to perfect these last few years. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are many things to be talked about when farmers get together. But we cannot talk about any of them until we are all satisfied in our own minds that we understand our price support programs and what they mean to us. There is no use talking about crop insurance if you don't have price supports, because how can you regulate an insurance program or values if you don't have some stability in the selling price of the grains that you're going to insure or the crops you're going to insure? What's the use of talking about REA programs? Their farmers are so poor they can't buy the equipment or install the electricity when it comes down the road by their door. What's the use of talking about good credit programs if there isn't any money, if there isn't any use borrowing the money at good interest rates or for long terms, and there isn't any assurance of paying it back? And what's the use of talking about soil conservation in this country if, as a matter of fact, when prices go down, we know that American farmers have to abandon soil conservation and attempt to try to make it up by mining what remaining fertility there is in his soil? I don't think anything had a more serious impact, even the ignorance of our forefathers who started out in the southeast part of this country with a one-crop system and abandoned the land when it lost its fertility and moved on to the next. I don't think anything had a more serious impact, even including that, than the low income period for farmers in 1920, because all of you know that your neighbors and maybe even some of you, when the price of wheat went down to 25 cents a bushel or less, went out and planted more wheat next year, the following year, to try to overcome the loss that you'd sustained that year. And you didn't buy fertilizer. And you didn't follow any kind of a contouring practice. You didn't follow any kind of a soil conservation practice, and some of us knew about them even in that time. Why? Because we had no money to do it with, in the first place, and second, we were trying to keep our body and soul together and our families fed. So there's no use talking about those kind of programs unless you've got a sound price support program for farmers. A sound price support program which is not going to pass out with the post-war adjustment, but will be here as long as farmers are left on the face of this earth. Our farm program in this country is the greatest farm program of all history, of all times, and of all countries. And we got it by hard and diligent work, and we have got to retain it by hard and diligent work right from this moment on, because it is not going to be with us unless you understand how it serves you and are willing to fight for it and are willing to express yourselves to the people who represent you in the Congress where these laws are made. We're never going to have 48 price support programs in this country, one for every state. It's going to be a federal program. We are not going to have in this country 48 different crop goals programs and recommendations. There has to be a coordination between it, because North Dakota could have one view of the wheat business and South Dakota another view of it. And how would we all be getting along if we didn't have some central clearinghouse in which to do that job? And finally, ladies and gentlemen, let's say to ourselves very frankly, we have very little use for cooperatives if we don't have any decent price to sell our commodities in the market for, and or any money from the sale of those commodities to buy things in this market. Cooperatives, in my opinion, are the soundest piece of free enterprise that this country knows about. A congressman from my state went on the air from New York City over a national hookup not so long ago, and he said that farmers' cooperatives, or cooperatives generally, were socialistic, in fact communistic. They were something different than the free enterprise system. I say to you, what is more free enterprise than an organization in which every member has a right to speak his mind and to share equally with all other members? What is more free enterprise and more democratic than an organization in which everybody shares in the profit equally according to his participation and his active support of that cooperative? What can be more free enterprise than an organization which cannot expand out and control all the rest of the industry of its kind in the country and dominate all the rest of the industry of that character. That, ladies and gentlemen, is free enterprise in its basic fundamental characteristics. And I refer to the farm cooperatives such as you folks in this state have been so ably building these past few years. But there are folks who say that these things are not good for the American people, that they deprive somebody of selling us things at a profit that we don't want to, that whether we want to buy them or not. Well, I say to you that those kind of people are not talking about the kind of farm programs which I think has been in force and effect in this country. And then let me just say one or two words further about this business of communism. I think, and I say this without any intention to flatter anybody, that the people on the face of this earth who have done more to stop communism in the world and in the United States are the American farmer. A few minutes ago we reminded ourselves that we shipped 91 million tons of food overseas in the fiscal year just ended. Where did it go? What did it do? Well, I'll tell you. Some of that food turned the tide of the election in Italy last year. It prevented the communists from taking over Italy because our food in the mouths and in the hands of the Italians, coming from a democratic country, created in their hearts or retained in their hearts something of the belief that democracies could operate effectively, because here was one that could take care of itself and send us some help here in Italy. And they rejected the bait hung before their faces by the communists. It helped turn the tide of the election in France just the other day, when those of you who read the paper the last 24 hours observed that the communists lost considerable ground in the recent election in France. It gave our German brethren some opportunities to stop and think before they swallowed the communist bait in Eastern Europe. And the rest of those countries, Yugoslavia and some of the others. And, ladies and gentlemen, it was actually useful in keeping Greece out of the hands of the Russian-controlled whatever kind of government they were trying to establish down there. And the Mediterranean is open to all the ships of the world today because American farmers worked hard, worked intelligently, and with the help of God, produced food which we could send to our folks overseas in abundance. And that brings me to this last one that have been leveled at us farmers by the gentleman from Congress from the state of Minnesota. He issued a report the other day in which he said that our export programs were the cause of the high cost of living. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he said that our export programs were the cause of the high cost of living. Well, we were exporting food every year of our history. And sometimes we had high prices, and sometimes we had low prices. We have in this country produced 1,300,000,000 bushels of wheat for 2 or 3 years. And yet we have only consumed 800 million bushels of wheat domestically. Well, now, what are we going to do with the other 500 million bushels of wheat? We exported it, ladies and gentlemen, and we exported it without it having any impact on the cost of living. And so I'd just like to say to you in closing that it seems to me that it does make a difference what we, the American people, and we, the farmers, do in this country about the things that have served us well. We must be diligent because as liberty is the price of liberty, someone said, is diligence. Just so good farm programs must be supported by the diligent day in and day out thought of farmers. We must make them efficient, effective, and useful. And we must stop those who would destroy them for political reasons or for any other kind of reason. I don't know why the gentleman from Minnesota went to New York and then came out and said that the high cost of living was due to farm support prices. Of course, I think I know. I think he wanted to take off of a certain group in this country the accusation that when what they did in Congress in 1946 was the cause of higher prices to consumers. I think, as you would say it up here now and then, he tried to put the monkey, get the monkey off of their back over onto the price support back of farmers. And maybe that's good. Maybe we ought to tolerate that in political years. But there are other people who are fundamentally shooting at our price support programs who will continue to do so after election is over. And it's those kind of people who have put that big gang of lobbyists down in Congress, and it is those kind of people who can make money if they are successful. And it is those kind of people who are a threat to farm programs from year in and year out. And unless we are intelligently able to meet them, ladies and gentlemen, the folks in Washington aren't going to be able to do it alone. As diligent and interested as I think the folks in my department are, we are not going to be able to do it alone unless we have behind us groups of farmers all over this country such as you. So I plead with you, no matter what happens the next few months, I plead with you to be diligent and interested in your farm programs, and take a good look at the people who are presuming to speak for you down there. Take a good look at me, as a matter of fact. And if you don't like the things I'm saying, let me know about it. Write me a mean letter. If you like some of the things we say, why, maybe you can write a nice letter once in a while, but don't worry about that. Above all, don't forget we're there. Because if you ever forget that you have instruments serving you in the capital of this United States, then you're sunk and they're sure sunk. Because nobody's going to pay attention to the Department of Agriculture unless they believe it is backed up by the farmers of America. We are your servants. We work for you. Our salary comes out of your taxes. And if you don't get quid pro quo, as your lawyers would say, or if you don't get value received, as the rest of us would say, then, ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of your fault as well as ours. So, in conclusion, and with deep appreciation for the opportunity I've had to talk with you about your business and my business, I again want to say that as I see the Farmers Union growing over this country, I take renewed courage in the belief that democracy will live in this world. It is under test, as it has never been under test before. It cannot undergo another depression as it went in 1932 with the assurances that we will come out whole as we did in that time. We're not sure that we have the great leadership that was raised up in that period of time, but more than that, when in 1932 the face of the earth, most of the civilized countries, was dotted here and there with active, efficient democracies, successful democracies. This time, there are hardly any democracies on the face of this world who can come to our help if we got into trouble in 1948, 49, or 50. In 1932, there was not a great colossus over the sea, which is a world power today and has an ideology almost contradictory in every respect to ours. And that colossus will not stand by to let us work out our problems if we have to go into another depression. So it isn't just saying, well, these depressions are cycles in the American economy. We can't stand another whirl on that wheel, ladies and gentlemen, and you are the folks, and I'm sure you are the folks, who are going to see that it don't happen again in this country. Thank you.
A very enlightening message to us here this afternoon on problems relating to agriculture.
To show what you're up against in this free enterprise game. In 1926, one of the high officials of the Standard Oil Company was in Germany. And he was shocked to find what Germany had been able to do through her scientific research. A country without oil, a country without gasoline, a country that found out how to take its coal and other chemicals and do the wondrous things of making synthetic oil, synthetic gasoline, and so forth. And he wrote home, it's all official here, to the Standard Oil Company, telling of the serious dangers that confront the oil industry in the world. They got worried about their own future. My heavens, if you ever permitted that process to get into the United States and make a plentiful supply of cheap gasoline, what would happen to the oil industry, petroleum industry? So the Standard Oil Company entered into a cartel arrangement with the big industrialists of Germany, I.G. Farben, whereby the United States would stay out of this special chemical field, and Germany would rely upon the Standard Oil and the other institutions to get them their oil, their gasoline. The one thing that they must be sure about was that in this country we didn't learn how to make butane and make synthetic gasoline. And that goes on from 1926 to how to make rubber, synthetic oil. That goes on clear up to 1940 and into 41, just before Pearl Harbor, where with that sort of an international cartel, this country was denied free enterprise. This country was denied the use, the knowledge of those patents to make those things in this country of which we were so short through the war, and so many hundred thousands of our boys had to go out over the world and get into what they did. I want, above all things, that every local in the Farmers Union get this book and have somebody in that local read it and understand the invisible government, private government. Oh heavens, if you want to go into some country and some fellow come over there here, you got to go and get a visa in your picture and whatnot. Some poor guy. Or swear under oath that you never were a communist or smelt one. While all that's going on, and I don't want any more Stalin and communism than anybody in this room, but while that's going on, this international rigging of these big institutions dealing with rubber, dealing with oil, goes on for these monopolistic profits, backed up not only with our tax money, but our kids. Do you think we ought to know that? I have known Mr. Burge for years. I'm proud I have this book. It's autographed to me and sent to me in March 27, 45. He said, I hope you can make some good use of it through your organization and help the people to know what's going on. Because he was thwarted and frustrated in his prosecutions, after getting all this material on all these institutions, he resigned and went back to law practice. Another record you should have. United States versus economic concentration and monopoly. Here it is. Government document. Even in the food industry. Quite a story on A&P and other institutions. The constant concentration of the stores and the factories back of the stores concentrating to get control of the distribution, farm machinery, clothes, food, everything. All invisible governments. I mean institutions that if their expenses go up, they've got a state body or a federal body to go to and get their income rates up. I mean these institutions that are so big by their size, whether it's the packing industry, the meat packing industry, the automotive industry, or whatever it is, by their very power of concentration, can fix the price that you have to pay for the things that you buy. I say to you, you can never live under a legislated economy such as that is, without comparable legislation for farmers to protect them too on the price side and the income side, so that they can have the purchasing power to compete and get the things out of life